Have you ever been so close to meeting your first grandchild, but were told to stay away? At 39 weeks pregnant, this woman thought she'd set clear boundaries with her mother-in-law until a phone call turned into a meltdown. Would you let her visit anyway? Or hold your ground? So, here's where it all started. She was 33 weeks pregnant, still tired, still swollen, still trying to find a comfortable position to sleep in, and yet, she opened her home to her mother-in-law. Why? Because she wanted to be fair. She thought, let's give her some time with us before the baby arrives. Let's show her that we're not shutting her out. Now, keep in mind, this mother-in-law lives across the country. It's not like she could just pop in and out. So, they figured a proactive visit would help set the stage. They told her clearly, please come now, spend some time, and then plan to return a week after the baby is born. We'll be ready then. There's a special religious ceremony planned 8 days after the birth. You can host it if you'd like. We'd love for you to be part of that. And to be honest, that sounds incredibly reasonable, don't you think? They didn't say, don't come at all. They didn't say, we don't want you involved. They said, please wait until we're ready. But here's where it turns. Fast forward to 39 weeks. The due date is near. Stress is high, sleep is low, and suddenly a text pings in at dawn. Are you up? Her husband responds, probably assuming it's a simple check-in. But then the phone rings. And what follows? A complete emotional landslide. Her mother-in-law goes straight into talking about flights. Not after the baby, not around the ceremony, but right after the due date, or sooner. And when she's reminded, gently but firmly, that this was already discussed and agreed on, she loses it, screaming, guilt-tripping, saying things like, you can't stop me from coming to the city, and, I may never see this child, maybe I just won't ever meet them. Now pause here for a second. Imagine being 9 months pregnant and listening to that kind of emotional outburst, hormonal, exhausted, trying to hold your little family together as you prepare for birth, and then, suddenly having to emotionally parent your husband's parent. Where's the line? Where does empathy end and enabling begin? And how much space do new parents deserve to ask for without being made to feel cruel or controlling? Her husband stood firm, and that's important. He didn't yell back, he didn't cave, he just repeated their boundary, over and over, until the phone call eventually ended. But what stuck with her, what she still can't shake, is the dread. Because what if this woman, this very emotional, boundary-pushing woman, actually shows up in town anyway? Uninvited, early, determined. That's not just a visit, that's a storm waiting to happen. So let me ask you, especially if you've been in the shoes of either the new parent or the excited grandparent, at what point does love cross the line into control? And when boundaries are ignored, is it still a family visit, or is it emotional manipulation? We'd love to hear your take. But here's the thing, what happens when someone won't take not yet for an answer? Let's be real. We've all known someone like this. Someone who doesn't hear a boundary as a request, they hear it as rejection. Someone who responds to, not now, with drama, with desperation, and sometimes with guilt. That's exactly what happened next. After her husband calmly reminded his mother that they'd asked for time, just a bit more time before any visits, she doubled down, not just with words, but with emotion. The conversation quickly spiraled into a guilt-laced meltdown. Her mother-in-law said things like, "You're keeping me from my grandchild." She cried, she shouted, she accused. It stopped being about timing or logistics and became about power and fear. Fear that she'd be shut out, fear that the baby would be born, grow up, and she'd be forgotten. Now, some people might hear this and feel compassion for the mother-in-law. She's excited, she wants to be involved. It's her first grandchild. And that's fair. There's room in this story for empathy. But here's where the situation becomes more complex. This wasn't the first time she crossed a line. There's history here, deeply personal history. Years ago, at a wedding, this same mother-in-law groped her daughter-in-law's chest. Let that sink in. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was physical, it was traumatic, and it was never fully acknowledged. So now, as labor approaches, A time when a woman's body is more vulnerable than ever, that memory resurfaces, the anxiety grows, and the idea of this woman showing up, uninvited, becomes not just uncomfortable, but unsafe. Can you blame her for wanting privacy? This isn't just about a plane ticket, it's about emotional safety, physical safety, trust. And yet, there's another layer. She doesn't want to cause a rift. She doesn't want to block her husband from seeing his mother, if he wants to. She's not trying to be the villain in this story. In fact, she's working hard not to be. At her husband's request, she's trying to stay cordial, polite, measured, but the internal conflict is heavy. Because if they let the mother-in-law visit, despite weeks of asking for space, what message does that send? That loud voices win? That boundaries are negotiable if you cry enough? Or worse, that fear works? So here's the hard question. When someone breaks your trust in the past, how do you handle them during the most fragile chapter of your life? And if your partner's family keeps pushing, who gets to draw the line? Let us know how you'd handle it. Would you bend to keep the peace? Or stay firm and risk the fallout? But let's flip the script for a second. What if she actually shows up? No warning, no respect for the timeline, just books a flight, knocks on the door, or worse, calls from the hotel down the street. Now what? This was the fear quietly building in the back of her mind. Because, let's face it, people who ignore boundaries rarely stop at one no. And when they feel entitled, they often double down. Just being in the city suddenly becomes a way to keep the pressure on. Oh, I'm not visiting, I just happen to be nearby, they'll say. But we all know what that really means. It puts the entire burden of enforcement back on the couple. Now here she is, 39 weeks pregnant, emotionally drained, physically sore, and wondering whether she has to defend her space while preparing to give birth. That's not just exhausting, that's unfair. And this is where the story gets even trickier. She's torn, truly torn. Kind of a question make it, because she's not made of stone. She wants to be understanding. She knows how much grandparents can mean to a child, and she doesn't want to be the person who permanently damages a relationship out of fear or frustration. Kind of a question make it, but the stakes feel too high. If they give in and see the mother-in-law during that fragile window, after saying so clearly for weeks, please wait, what does that teach her? That all she has to do is shout louder, show up unannounced, guilt them harder. And worse, what if her showing up disrupts the birth experience itself? Think about that for a second. We don't often talk about how sacred those first few hours and days are, for bonding, for recovery, for mental peace. And when you have someone around who makes you feel tense, who's ignored your voice, who's triggered your trauma, you don't just feel uncomfortable, you feel unsafe. Now, some people might say, well, you can't control what other people do. True, but you can control what you respond to, and this woman is trying to do exactly that. Hold the line without escalating things, keep her cool while protecting her space. But the emotional labor of doing so, it's enormous. Her husband, to his credit, has stood firm. But the silence that follows, no apology, no reflection, no change in tone, makes it clear that the message probably didn't land. So here's the question she keeps turning over in her mind. If she does show up early, do they ignore her, avoid her, let her in for a quick visit? And whatever they choose, what are they modeling for their child? Because the truth is, this isn't just about birth, it's about the kind of family culture they're building from day one. So let me ask you, when someone storms your boundaries once, do you give them a second chance? Or do you hold your ground even harder? What would you do if the knock came on your door? But here's a question we don't ask enough. What happens after the knock, if you open the door? Because let's say she shows up early, and you let her in. Maybe just for a quick visit, maybe just to keep the peace. Sounds harmless, right? Except now, the boundary you worked so hard to set has just been rewritten by someone else. And that's what she's afraid of. Not just the visit, not just the stress, but the precedent. Because if the mother-in-law learns that showing up uninvited still gets her what she wants, what's to stop her next time? Next milestone? Next holiday? next decision she doesn't agree with. The message is clear. If you push hard enough, scream loud enough, make people uncomfortable enough, you win. And what kind of parenting foundation is that to build on? She's starting to realize this isn't just about the first visit. It's about the pattern. It's about whether this child will grow up watching their parents constantly walk on eggshells around grandma. Whether this mom will always be the one compromising while someone else bulldozes her comfort. Now, of course, some people might say, "You're overthinking it, she's just excited." And maybe she is. Maybe this is all coming from love, poorly expressed, but still love. But love without respect can feel a lot like manipulation. An excitement that ignores consent isn't joyful, it's intrusive. Let's not forget, this woman has already gone through something deeply personal with her mother-in-law, something that involved her body, her autonomy, and it wasn't just awkward, it was traumatic. The idea of that person hovering around at her most vulnerable moment while giving birth. It's not just anxiety, it's a legitimate fear. Still, she's trying. She really is. She hasn't cut her off. She hasn't made demands. In fact, she's been remarkably restrained. But with each push from the other side, her patience starts to thin. And now she's left wondering, should I finally say something myself? Should she, not her husband, be the one to call the mother-in-law and say, "This behavior is not okay. You need to respect my space"? It's a hard call. On one hand, it might give her back a sense of control, a voice. On the other hand, it could cause a deeper rift, escalate tension, maybe even make her look like the bad guy in the eyes of extended family. But silence hasn't worked. Appeasement hasn't either. So maybe it's time to speak. So here's where we want to hear from you. When someone oversteps repeatedly and your partner's holding the line, should you speak up too? Or is it better to stay behind the scenes and protect your peace? What would you do, not just for yourself, but for the family you're trying to build? Here's a thought to sit with. What if setting a boundary isn't just about protection, but about love? Let's bring it back to her story. The mother-to-be, standing at the edge of one of the biggest transitions of her life, doesn't want drama. She doesn't want conflict. She wants peace. But to get that peace, she might have to fight for it. After everything, her calm responses, her husband's firm words, her careful patience, the situation still hangs in the air like a storm cloud. The mother-in-law hasn't apologized. She hasn't backed off. And now, the due date is just days away. So, she's made a decision. Not an easy one, not a loud one, but a clear one. If the mother-in-law shows up early, she's not engaging. No visits, no explanations, no giving in out of guilt. She's not going to create a scene. She's just going to focus on her baby, her healing, her family. Because here's the truth. You don't owe anyone access to you during your most vulnerable moments. Yes, it might cause waves. Yes, some people in the family might whisper, criticize, or try to play the peacemaker role. But she's made peace with that, because she's not just thinking about the birth. She's thinking about what kind of mother she wants to be. And that mother leads with love and limits. And maybe, just maybe, by modeling those limits now, she's teaching her child something powerful. That it's okay to say no. That love and respect go hand in hand. That even family relationships need healthy boundaries to thrive. She's not slamming the door forever, but she is choosing to close it right now, until she feels ready to open it again on her terms. And here's where we land. It's okay to love someone and still say, "Not now." It's okay to want family close, but not too close. And it's okay to ask for space, even if the person asking for access believes they deserve it. So whether you're a mom, a dad, a grandparent, or just someone trying to navigate tricky family dynamics, remember this. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks, and you get to choose who holds the key. Now, before we wrap this episode up, let's keep the conversation going. If you've ever had to set a hard boundary with family, drop a gal in the comments. If someone ever pushed your limits, but you stayed firm, leave a brin. Or, if you're still figuring it out, just send us a plen. You're not alone. We read every single one, and your story might help someone else feel less alone too. Until next time, take care of your peace and protect it like you would your family. Thanks for spending time with us. We'll see you in the next episode.